Hey guys, just wanted to take a minute and walk you guys through the install process on this 3-inch coil spacer lift. I got this on Amazon. It's a kit made by Supreme Suspensions. It's a 3-inch coil spacer kit. Now the spacer itself isn't 3 inches, and they tell you that in there. It's probably about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches thick, but it's kind of a cantilever system because your coil spring is further up in the angle of the suspension geometry, so the lift effect is more than the height of the spacer. Now, obviously what you want to start off doing is lifting the truck up, put it on jack stands at the frame, not underneath the control arms, and then of course take the front wheels off. You're going to need some suspension droop on this to be able to accomplish the lift. So you take the wheels off and support the control arm with your jack so that you can remove what you need to remove. Now, starting off over here, it's kind of hard to tell. Sorry, I'm trying to narrate this while I'm watching it. Right now I'm starting with you want to take the brake caliper off first. Once you remove the two bolts that hold the caliper in, which are T40 or Torx number 40, then you just pry out the brake caliper. If it's on the driver's side, you're going to pry it out from the top. If it's the passenger side, it's the bottom. I don't know why Chrysler chose to do it opposite like that, but that's what they did. And then one thing that I normally like to do, you don't have to do this, this is your option. Put a couple lug nuts on the brake rotor just to keep it in place. That way it's not flopping around or anything. You don't risk scratching it up or dinging it up. After that, you can remove the brake caliper bracket if you want, and then just remove the rotor altogether. It'll give you a little more room, but I found it unnecessary. I think in the install instructions it also says to go ahead and remove the entire shock. I found that unnecessary as well. I just removed the top part of the shock just to allow the suspension to droop. And then here I'm removing the tie rod end. Normally you would use either a pickle fork or a tie rod end remover. Some people will take the castle nut off so far and then smack it with the hammer. The good thing about the way Chrysler made these tie rod ends is that the top of the tie rod end, the threads don't go all the way to the end, so that you can get a wrench on there. So I was able to just strike that with a hammer, and it didn't hurt anything. You also want to undo your sway bar end link. I didn't take it all the way out. I just, again, removed the link that attaches to the sway bar itself. I found that sufficient enough to be able to get the job done. In the instructions it also says to go ahead and remove the upper and lower ball joints. And again, I found that unnecessary. I removed the upper, enough for the suspension to droop all the way down, and it actually kind of helps having the steering knuckle attached, because the extra weight of it will help the lower control arm droop a little more. So now, those of you that are heavily dependent on impact tools and air ratchets and things like that, you're going to be a little disappointed. It may seem like there's a lot of room to work under there, but you may or may not, depending on your tools. So just bust out those hand tools and get ready to do some work. It's really not that bad. As you can see there, I'm using a 1/2 inch drive 84 tooth gear wrench ratchet. with the flex head, and it does the job perfectly for me. It helps me a lot. I really do love that wrench. And if you have trouble with that sway bar end link, you can use a 1/2 inch wrench, open end, and it'll fit around the notched parts of those end links to hold it in place so that you can get them off without it spinning. And then there you can see I just gave the tie rod end a whack with a hammer. Now, to do the upper ball joint, you're going to want to remove the cotter pin. Once you do that, pull the pin, break the nut free, and once you break it free, you can pretty much spin it off by hand. And then here I'm just readjusting the jack, or repositioning the jack, I'm sorry. Just making sure I had it where I needed it, and I went back to letting it droop, because once you go to separate the tie rod end, or not the tie rod end, I'm sorry, the upper ball joint, you don't want to have the suspension compressed, because you won't be able to separate the two. So here I'm just pulling out that cotter pin. And then I believe the upper ball joint is a 21 millimeter. And like I said, you just loosen that up and then you can spin it off by hand. Now once you get that off there, go and get your pickle fork or ball joint remover, whichever you're using. A few good whacks and it comes right out. No problem. And let your jack down to let the suspension droop. And once it's drooped, you can just reach in and pull your coil spring out. Might have to rotate it a little bit if it gives you any trouble. And then you're going to take your spacer, you're going to take your isolator off the coil, attach it to the top of the spacer, and then set the spacer on top of the spring. And after you do that, you need to position it so that the pigtail of the coil at the bottom matches the notch on the lower coil spring bucket. If you get it almost there and not quite, you can kind of use a hammer or a pry bar or something to manipulate it if you need to. And it does help if you are working on your vehicle on the ground that you go ahead and sit on the ground for this part. I made the mistake of trying to sit on my creeper seat. I wasn't quite getting the leverage that I needed. Me having a big gut doesn't really help much, but I finally figured it out here and got off the seat. Obviously, if you're working on a lift with this kind of stuff, I envy you, first of all. But it'll definitely be a lot easier because everything will be at, chest height or head height, depending on how high you work with. I do apologize because I got most of this tear down and reinstall filmed, and then the camera battery died on me, so you're going to miss the part where I jack everything back up. But basically what you want to do to get everything back in there correctly is to go ahead and have a friend handy that can operate the jack while you're keeping the upper shock pin and the upper ball joint in line with where they need to go. Obviously don't put your hands anywhere, you know, in the line of those things, but just keep them lined up while somebody else is jacking it up so that you can get them where they need to be. And then once they're where they need to be, you can pretty much do the rest yourself, which is what I did. And then after that, you know, the install of everything is the reverse of the tear down. It's pretty simple. Just make sure you're torquing everything down to factory specs. Torque specifications are in Haynes manuals and Chilton's manuals in case you don't have a field service manual. Or sorry, factory service manual. And after you do that, it is recommended that you get an alignment. And that's pretty much it, guys. I hope this was helpful to some of you. I know there wasn't a whole lot of videos on these spacers out there. I've seen a couple videos, but usually people are just talking a little bit about them and showing a before and after kind of thing, but not really showing anything helpful on how to actually get it done. So if this was helpful to you, please give it a comment, hit the like button, and go ahead and subscribe for more. Planning on doing some more how-to videos in the future. Thanks a lot, guys.